Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I want to take you on a journey. It is a journey that starts not in a boardroom, not on Wall Street, and not in the halls of some Ivy League business school. It starts with a mystery, a whisper. A strange little literary anomaly that appeared out of nowhere in Southern California about 10 or 12 years ago. Imagine walking into a community center or a local gathering and finding a stack of books, given away entirely for free, by an anonymous organization. The author simply called himself Phan Thien Anonymous. He didn't want fame. He didn't want a spot on a bestseller list. He claimed that the ideas in this book were not even his own, but rather a distillation of 5,000 years of human wisdom. The book was a Vietnamese adaptation, a profound cultural translation of concepts that echoed the greatest success philosophies ever written. Titled The Secret of Phan Thien An, the richest man in the world. Now, I know what you might be thinking. The richest man in the world? Is this another get-rich-quick manifesto? Another hustle culture playbook telling me to wake up at 4 a.m. and cold call strangers? No. I need you to completely empty your cup before we dive into this. This is a story about the profound, sometimes terrifying, and deeply philosophical nature of wealth, human dignity, and the subconscious mind. It is a story that completely shatters the traditional paradigms we hold about money, morality, and what it actually means to succeed. Let's start right where this anonymous author starts, by attacking a belief that is so deeply ingrained in our global consciousness, especially in various religious and cultural traditions, that we rarely stop to question it. You know the phrase, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." For centuries, there has been a romanticization of poverty. We are taught, subtly and overtly, that there is an inherent virtue in being poor, that wealth is somehow synonymous with corruption, greed, and a loss of the soul. The author of this text steps right up to that ancient idea and tears it to the ground. He argues, quite forcefully, that poverty is often a tool used to justify evil. Think about it deeply. How much of the world's crime, how much class warfare, how much theft, resentment, and generational trauma is rooted in the desperation of poverty? Poverty, the author argues, is not a badge of honor, it is a cage. And wealth? Wealth is not an accident. It is not a lottery ticket. The author uses a beautiful, timeless metaphor to explain this, the metaphor of the tree. In our modern microwave society, we want the fruit without planting the seed. We want the heat from the fireplace, but we are standing in front of it screaming, "Give me fire, and then I will give you wood." It doesn't work that way. Money is merely the fruit. The effort, the time, the patience, the planting of the seeds, that is the work. Wealth is the natural, inevitable result of a specific set of actions and mindsets. But the author's pursuit of wealth wasn't just about buying luxury goods. It was about psychological liberation. You see, growing up in a post-colonial world, he harbored a deep inferiority complex toward the former colonizers, the Americans, the Japanese, the French. Money, financial independence, and undeniable success became the great equalizers. Wealth allowed him to stand shoulder to shoulder with anyone in the world, stripping away the generational shame of being from a conquered people, allowing him to respect himself, and in turn, genuinely respect others. Why does this matter? It matters because of a very specific, heartbreaking realization the author had at the Metropole Hotel in Hanoi. Picture the scene. The Metropole is a stunning, historic, colonial-era hotel. Our author, now a wealthy, successful man, is sitting in the lobby. He looks around, and what does he see? He sees foreign investors, expatriates, international businessmen making deals, drinking expensive wine, carving up the economic landscape. And who are the Vietnamese people in the room? They are the servers. They are the bellhops. They are the staff pouring the tea. In that moment, despite his massive bank account, the author felt an overwhelming sense of what he calls, Vong Then, being homeless in his own homeland. He had no peers of equal stature to share a table with. It was this exact moment of profound isolation that catalyzed the writing of this book. He didn't write it to boast. He wrote it to help the next generation shorten their agonizing journey to success. He wanted his people to join the global community not as servants, but as equals, with pride and dignity. And just to prove that his relationship with money was purely philosophical, the author shares a personal habit that is as eccentric as it is brilliant. He owns a beautiful, impeccably tailored suit. But he has had every single pocket meticulously removed from it. Why? It serves as a physical memento mori, a reminder of death. You cannot take anything with you when you die. A suit with no pockets cannot hold coins, wallets, or gold. This simple, profound garment explains his total detachment from money and his compulsion to give his services and products away for free. The money is a byproduct of his value. It is not the master of his soul. With that philosophical foundation laid, the narrative transports us to a setting of almost unimaginable opulence. We leave the preface and meet the protagonist of our story, Phan Thien An. He is a 76-year-old billionaire living on the island of Maui, Hawaii. But he doesn't just live in a house, he lives in a sprawling estate simply called V. Imagine a marvel of Roman and American architecture sitting on the edge of the Pacific Ocean. He has a private beach. He has a private golf course. He has 3 distinct palace-like structures, one for his family, one for his guests, and one for his staff. Inside there is a library containing 20,000 gold-bound books, all meticulously digitized by an advanced computer system. His net worth is estimated to be somewhere between $4 and $6 billion. But if you ask Phan Thien An if he is the richest man in the world because of his billions, he will correct you. Despite his staggering financial empire, An redefines wealth entirely. To him, true wealth is health. It is love. It is patience. It is character and morality. He looks back on a 60-year career, and while he acknowledges that his physical body has aged, he notes that his eyes still retain the spark of youth. The money is just the echo of a life lived with immense character. And then, he does something that defies all conventional business logic. He summons his loyal accountant of 35 years, a man named Alan Chapman, and issues a shocking, absolute order: liquidate the entire empire. Everything. Sell the companies, sell the assets, turn it all into cash, and give it away. Chapman is stunned. But An has a flawless, if unorthodox, logic. His beloved wife has passed away. His children and grandchildren are already independently successful. He refuses to ruin their lives by burdening them with unearned billions. Instead, he orders the distribution of his wealth. 30% goes to his family, 30% goes to all of his employees, and a massive 40% goes directly to charity. He wants to pay off a debt he feels he has owed for 50 years before he passes away. But he doesn't forget loyalty. He looks at Chapman, his friend of 3.5 decades, and gives him $50 million and the very Maui mansion they are standing in. And calls Chapman's friendship his greatest asset, asking only one thing in return: that Chapman stay by his side until An fulfills one final, mysterious promise. It takes 13 months to liquidate the Phan Thien An empire. Let that sink in. 13 months to dismantle a lifetime of empire building, replacing it with a legacy of unprecedented, world-shifting altruism. When it is finally done, An leads Chapman out of the grand palaces and into the back of the garden, to a small, dusty, neglected room that has been the source of wild rumors among the staff for years. Some thought it held gold, others whispered about skeletons or a mad relative locked away. An unlocks the door. Inside, there is no gold. There are no diamonds. There is only a single, old, rusted iron chest. And inside that chest are leather scrolls, to kin, written in ancient Han characters. Chapman is bewildered. But An looks at him with the gravity of a dying man, and tells him that these dusty pieces of leather are worth more than a room filled to the ceiling with diamonds. These scrolls are the sole reason for his success, his peace, and his billions. They are not magic spells. They are a highly structured, psychological technology. There are 10 scrolls in total. The first scroll is the master key. It is an instruction manual on how to study the other 9. The remaining 9 scrolls contain the fundamental, immutable laws of success. But here is the profound part, the part that separates this from every self-help book you have ever read. The goal is not to read the scrolls and say, "Wow, that's good advice." The goal is deep, neurological reprogramming. The reader must memorize and internalize these principles through relentless daily repetition until they bypass the conscious mind entirely and become subconscious habits. You see, the conscious mind is full of doubt, fear, and fatigue. The subconscious mind is an execution engine. It just does what it is programmed to do. So why didn't he share this with his employees? Why didn't he build a school and teach this to the world? Why didn't he even tell his wife? Because 56 years ago, he took a sacred oath. He swore to share this secret with only one person. He has been waiting for over half a century for a guest to arrive. He doesn't know who this person is, but he knows he will recognize them through intuition and metaphysical science. And humbly admits to Chapman that he himself is not a genius. He is merely a mimic. He just copied what the scrolls told him to do, and that obedience allowed him to be creatively and massively successful. Now, his only remaining purpose in life is to wait for this unknown successor, hand over the chest, and finally rest. This brings us to the second massive movement of our story, a flashback that takes us 56 years into the past, explaining exactly how Young An got those scrolls. We meet him not as a billionaire in Hawaii, but as a young, poor, desperate driver for a wealthy and powerful merchant named Luong Tan. Young An doesn't want to be a driver forever. He wants to be a merchant. He wants to be rich. Luong Tan sits the young man down and gives him a brutal reality check. He warns him that the life of a merchant is not glamorous. It is lonely. It is unforgiving. When a merchant makes money, everyone smiles. When a merchant loses money, there is no sympathy, only predators waiting to pick the bones clean. But he sees the fire in his eyes, so he grants him his first trial. The mission is staggering. Luong Tan gives him 1,000 boxes of a new, highly effective Dutch anti-malarial medicine called HD305. He charges him a wholesale price of 2 piastres per box, meaning he is immediately in debt to his boss for 2,000 piastres. Any profit he makes above that, he keeps. But Luong Tan doesn't send him to the wealthy districts of Saigon. He sends him to the most impoverished, geographically brutal regions imaginable, Pleiku, and across the border into Paxi in Lower Laos. These are areas that other experienced merchants completely avoid because the people are deemed too poor to buy anything. Before An departs on this seemingly impossible suicide mission of sales, Luong Tan forces him to memorize a single sentence. I want you to listen to this sentence, because it is the bedrock of all human resilience. Luong Tan makes him repeat, asterisk. Failure will never overtake me if my determination to succeed is strong enough. Asterisk. Fast forward nearly a month. An is in Paxi, and he is broken. He is in a state of absolute, crushing despair. His suitcase is still heavy. He still has all 1,000 boxes of medicine. He has faced nothing but rejection. Doors slammed in his face. People refusing to listen. People looking at him with the hollow eyes of extreme poverty. The poison of self-doubt begins to creep into his mind. He starts questioning his very identity. Maybe he is just meant to be a driver. Maybe he isn't smart enough. He remembers the successful merchants in Saigon mocking these regions as unsellable. He starts to rationalize his failure, thinking that Luong Tan only succeeded here in the past because the economy was different back then. Or because Luong Tan was a once-in-a-generation genius. But there is one thing keeping him from getting on a bus and going home in shame: a girl. Her name is Mi-Hung, the daughter of a wealthy shop owner back home. And knows, with absolute certainty, that if he returns as a failed, broke driver, he will never be allowed to marry her. Driven by this love, this desperate need to be worthy, he resolves to try one last time. He promises himself he will wake up before dawn and visit every single clinic, every single grocery store, until his shoes wear through. That night, trying to save a few pennies on lodging, and wanders into a remote village to seek shelter. He finds a dilapidated stilt house on a hill. He knocks on the door, and it is opened by a French nun. But as he looks past her into the dim light of the stilt house, his heart stops. The floor is covered with bodies. Over 300 villagers are lying there, shivering, sweating, dying. A massive malaria epidemic has swept through the village, infecting 60% of the population. The local authorities have abandoned them. There are no funds. There is no medicine. There is only death waiting in the humid air. At this moment, and faces the ultimate moral crisis. In his suitcase are 1,000 boxes of the exact medicine needed to cure these people. But those boxes represent his future. They represent his dignity. They represent his ability to pay off his crushing debt to Luang Tan, and most importantly, they represent his only chance to marry Mi-Hung. If he gives them away, he is financially ruined. He is a failed merchant. He looks at the dying faces. He feels the weight of the suitcase. And then, a profound internal shift occurs. He realizes that while these boxes are his key to a glorious future, they are literally the difference between breathing and rotting in the ground for these villagers. He opens the suitcase. He gives all 1,000 boxes to the French nun. For free. When the nun, overwhelmed with shock, protests, and says they have absolutely no way to pay him, and shakes his head. He insists that these dying people need it far more than his wealthy employer does. He walks away from the stilt house into the night. He goes to sleep under the stars, feeling like an absolute, catastrophic failure as a merchant, but feeling a deep, unshakable peace as a human being. When An finally returns to Saigon, he is humiliated. He practices a lie in his head over and over again. He is going to tell Luang Tan that he was robbed by bandits on the road. It's the only way to save face. But when he stands before his master, the lie dies in his throat. He decides to tell the brutal truth. But before An can even speak, Luang Tan stops him. The old merchant reveals that he recently had a vivid, prophetic dream. He dreamed of a young man standing on a high mountain. An eagle flew overhead and dropped a chest at the young man's feet. And the young man in that dream was An. And in tears confesses everything. He tells his master about the rejections, the despair, and finally, the village, the nun, and his decision to give away the entire inventory. He waits for the explosion of anger. He waits to be fired. Instead, Luang Tan smiles. He is deeply comforted. He looks at his young driver and tells him that this trip was never a test of his sales ability. It was a test of his character. Luang Tan had been searching for a way out, a successor, for 36 years. By giving the medicine away, and proved he possessed the rare combination of immense drive and unbreakable compassion required to carry the greatest secret in the world. He tells him to go back to being a driver, just temporarily, until the Lunar New Year passes. 2 months later, the old merchant is on his deathbed. Luang Tan summons him to his private villa to finally pass on the torch. He tells him a story from 47 years ago, when he himself saved a Chinese merchant in Xiaobang. In gratitude, he was taken to Guangzhou and given a rusted iron chest containing 10 leather scrolls. Luang Tan explains the brutal, unforgiving methodology of the scrolls. This is not casual reading. Scroll 1 teaches you how to rewire your brain. Scrolls 2 through 10 are the principles. But the rule, the unbreakable habit rule, is that each scroll must be read and practiced for 30 consecutive days before even looking at the next. 1. Read in the morning, read at noon, read out loud at night. 30 days. If you miss a day, you start over. This is the only way to force the philosophy out of the conscious mind and burn it into the subconscious. Before handing over the chest, Luong Tan binds into 3 sacred oaths. First, absolute discipline. He must follow the 30-day cycle of the scrolls perfectly. Second, radical charity. He must give away exactly 1/3 of all his future earnings to the poor. Not a tenth. A third. True success, Luong Tan insists, is intrinsically tied to the service of others. Third, absolute secrecy. He must keep the scrolls hidden until a supernatural sign reveals the next successor. Interestingly, Luong Tan notes that the third person to possess these scrolls, the one and will eventually find, will be permitted to break the silence and share this wisdom with the entire world. Luong Tan hands in the chest a small sum of 200 French francs, and a one-way boat ticket to France. He tells the young man, "Big fish must live in the ocean. Saigon is too small for what An is about to become." And so An sails to Marseille. He arrives in a strange, colorful, terrifyingly lonely land. He experiences the profound nakedness of being an immigrant, a stranger in a strange world who doesn't speak the language and has no safety net. In a tiny, cold room, he opens the iron chest, unrolls the first scroll, and begins the process of destroying his old self. Which brings us to the final part of today's exploration, the threshold of transformation. Imagine in 30 days later. He has completed the first scroll. The narrator describes this moment not as a graduation, but as a metamorphosis. He says his old skin has turned to dust. The seed of success has been swallowed. It now lives in his subconscious. He walks out into the streets of Marseille, and though he still looks like a poor immigrant, internally, he is a completely new entity. He has the silent, unshakable confidence of a winner before the world has even noticed the game has started. Success is not an external acquisition. It is an internal metamorphosis. And then, he opens scroll number 2. This is where the business philosophy of this book completely diverges from everything taught in modern corporate warfare. The core argument of the second scroll is this: the greatest, most unstoppable weapon in business, in sales, and in life, is love. I know how that sounds. It sounds soft. It sounds like a cliché. But listen to the profound logic here. The narrator argues that without love, he is nothing but a small merchant in a poor market. Why? Because logic can be debated. If you give a customer a logical reason to buy, they will find a logical reason not to. Strength and high-pressure tactics can be resisted. They build walls of defense in the other person's mind. People might counter your arguments, they might doubt your words, they might even criticize your appearance or your accent. But love? Genuine, radiating, subconscious love for the human being standing in front of you? That is an irresistible force. It disarms the ego. It melts the invisible shields we all carry around with us. When you look at a customer, a partner, or an enemy, and your internal, subconscious monologue is one of deep respect and love, they feel it. It changes your posture. It changes the micro-expressions on your face. It changes the resonance of your voice. Love is not a passive emotion in this philosophy. It is an active, tactical, overwhelming strategy that opens human hearts and, consequently, opens the doors to unimaginable success. Think about the journey we just took. We went from a billionaire liquidating his empire in Hawaii to a desperate young man giving away his only chance at wealth to save a village from malaria, to a lonely immigrant in France discovering that the ultimate weapon of world conquest is love. This isn't just a story about getting rich. It's a blueprint for tearing down the person you are today, and painstakingly building a person worthy of the world's wealth. The scrolls demand discipline. They demand charity. They demand a complete rewiring of how you view humanity. I want you to really let that sink in today. What is the fruit you are trying to pick, And have you actually planted the wood to build the fire? Are you just mimicking success, or are you willing to do the 30 days of silent, unglamorous work in the dark to change your subconscious? We will continue exploring these scrolls and the incredible life of Phan Thien An in our next episode. Until then, remember the mantra: failure will never overtake you if your determination to succeed is strong enough. Thanks for listening.